All right, a few more people rolling in. See, Peggy just connected to audio. Hi, Peggy.
Hi.
Good to see everyone. I am really excited about today's talk on Dichotomous Keys. This has been a highly requested talk. No family in particular, just how do we use keys to identify the plants that we have? I'm sure most of you know that our Brit Press has published several floras of Texas. So on this screen right here, we just have a few range plants of North Central Texas, the Flora of North Central Texas, our beloved book, the Flora of East Texas, Volume 1. Volume 2 is actually still in the works right now. And then the Ferns and Lycophytes of Texas. I really like this one, mostly just because I don't think people realize how many ferns and lycophytes there even are in Texas. So Tiana is going to start us off. Well, I can at least first start off by asking anybody if they have any questions on transcription. If you guys have come across anything during crowdsourcing that's been confusing, and we're still letting a few people in, but if anybody has any burning questions for me for crowdsourcing, we can go over a few of those before Tiana kicks off her talk today. Well, y'all have been flying through transcriptions. We're getting close to the end of transcription. There are just over 2,000 records remaining to transcribe in the Brit collection in crowdsourcing that y'all are doing. There's a possibility that I may, if we get to the end, there's a few Texas records in our Vanderbilt collection that need complete transcription. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I'm feeling confident that you guys will help us get to the end of all transcription for Texas and Oklahoma. We're really close. So I appreciate those of you who have been helping us so far. I think that we've got the last few people admitted in the Zoom meeting. So I'm going to pass it off to Tiana to get us started. Thank you, Tiana.
Thanks, Ashley. It's really lovely to see everyone's names, if not faces, today on Zoom. Let me share my screen. Bear with me a second. Okay, are y'all looking at my screen right now? I know it's not presentation mode. Oh, I just moved something around. Hold on. I have a new computer and I am figuring it out. So give me half a second to arrange everything. Where it is. Perfect. I thank you for introducing yourself. If I didn't know you already in the chat, I am reading through some of the comments that folks are putting in there. And so we've got Master Naturalist chiming in of the ones I can see on my screen, and a few people saying they just want to become more familiar with the use of the book. And folks saying that they are amateur botanists or that they're learning. And so I think that's where we're all coming from here. Dichotomous Keys have, especially of late, been near and dear to my heart because we have an intern project this summer, and they are assisting us by collecting specimens on some City of Fort Worth owned property. And you can actually, if y'all are seeing my video at all, you can see some of that behind me. So this is a property southeast of Benbrook Lake. that hopefully can be preserved and create a nice bigger corridor connecting to what is already preserved around Benbrook Lake. Anyway, all that back to these interns are inventorying part of this property to figure out what's out there and what's growing. They're trying to identify everything that's identifiable out there, using iNaturalist to make photo observations and collecting herbarium vouchers to bring them back here to the herbarium to preserve in our collection. And iNat, I was out with the students today, and I can't tell you that I know many of you also, like me, did not ever have access to iNat to help you kind of narrow down what you were looking at, to help you put you in the right part of the key. And it is just an amazing program. And I imagine it is different depending on where you are. But you'll see here, this is my general outline today. I'm just going to talk in general about plant identification. I'm going to talk about the types of keys that are out there. I'm going to tell you one of the methods for plant ID, which is kind of what we've been using with the interns. And then we're going to go through testing some keys. Hopefully that kind of jives with the kinds of things you were expecting from here, but we're a small enough group. Please raise your hand, and if I don't see it, Ashley will, and she'll interrupt me. She's not scared. So I don't mind going on tangents. Are there any questions just off the bat or comments that anyone would like to make? And you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask or state them. Okay. All right. And I am going to present in this method for now because, well, actually, how about that? A little bit better? Okay, I might switch back and forth because there's some URLs I want to jump out to while we're talking today. Okay, so the whole topic of plant identification in general is based on the premise that there are observable characters. And I'm talking about the kind of plant identification you and I are likely to be doing when we're observing something in the field with the naked eye, maybe with a hand lens, or maybe with a microscope, a general light microscope. But these observable characters we can use to group and differentiate species, right? We are making these observations about an individual plant, and we can say it is like this thing, and this thing is in the book, and that's what I'm keying to, and it is different from this because of this or that. And I think, was it Beth, one of your comments was about some of the language. I think that's part of why I love Dichotomous Keys. It's a whole nother language to learn, and I'm still learning it. And I think much like any language you pick up, you don't use it frequently, you lose it. And there are a lot of terms that are similar sounding, so they tickle your brain, and inevitably you get the wrong one when you haven't done it in a while. So I think it is just a constant learning effort, which is why I'm excited about it and I enjoy doing it. And you get better and better. I think in one of our previous Armchair Botany sessions, we were talking, Alan, I think, had brought up one of the characters to distinguish members of pecan and walnut, and how to differentiate the two. And it was actually a character that exists in the keys in the illustrated Flora of North Central Texas. And I just hadn't keyed them out in a while. And I didn't know about that character. And it was a really great tip. So the more you do it, the better you get. So methods, so computer vision, right? That is that's when I talk about iNaturalist, and I'm presuming that many of you have worked in iNaturalist before. And I'm putting the link in there just in case. But so I'm putting that link in there. iNaturalist, it's a photo observation community science project. It's a wonderful tool, and it has an ability in there to use computer vision technologies to identify the image of the plant that you're submitting. It does this just using a comparison of images, but those images it chooses to compare to can be weighted by the date or by the time of year and the location in which you're in. So you will get the more observations there are for an area that have been correctly identified, the more likely your image is to get correctly identified, or at least in the right ballpark. So it's only as good as the data that are being put into it. And that's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal place to start. I use iNaturalist regularly. And then identification keys, right? So this is making botanical knowledge accessible. There's no way we can know everything about all the plants in our area, 2,500 or so plants in the North Central Texas area. So having keys allows us just to make decisions slowly on bits and pieces here and arrive at a solution or at a result that may or may not be correct. Oh, Teresa, it is such a wonderful app. I have used it even more this summer. Kimberly is our in-house resident expert here at Brit. So maybe we'll have to have Kimberly come give an Armchair Botany on iNaturalist, or one of the rest of y'all, because I know you're also power users. So identification keys, there are two, generally speaking, two sorts of keys out there. There's a single access key or a dichotomous key. And this is the one that we're really going to be mostly talking about today. And one of the disadvantages of this, though, is that if the key tells you flowers are red or flowers are not red, and those are your two options, well, that presumes you have flowers. So it makes it very difficult to ID things when you are trying to identify something in the fall that flowers in the spring. So keys, how keys are written is very important. And if you use, the more and more keys you use, the more and more you'll get a feel for, oh, that's a good key, or that's not such a good key. So the best keys will use information that's always available on the plant, if possible. Yep, so, and that's what that second point in there. And then the other one is, and so I think most of y'all have used dichotomous keys before, or I'm seeing some of you say that you have in the chat. Another sort of key, which is really exciting, is the multi-entry and free access key. Go ahead. Did someone ask a question? You're welcome to ask one if you like, or make a comment. Okay. Well, if you change your mind, just please do put up your hand or unmute yourself. And so the disadvantage of, this is going back to you, Beth, the disadvantage of that sometimes is it's another set of terminology. In some ways, it's easier because it's more general, broad terminology. Are the leaves opposite? Are they alternate? But in some ways, it's more difficult. And on this next screen, oops, Ash, do you think you could do me a favor and have the same presentation open and just put those URLs in the chat? Because this is, so these are some examples on this screen right now of some of these multi-access, free access keys, and they're really great. This one up here is one of the, it's by, from Colby College. Let me click into it. So this is one of those multi-access keys. The idea here is that you put down, you make selections based on what you know, and it narrows down your choices for you. This is a good example of one of these is, I know many of you have probably downloaded some form of plant identification app, like the High County apps, I believe. So one of the really great floras that kind of reaches into East Texas is the Weekly's Flora of the Southeast. So that's probably the newest flora that's relevant, at least to the North Texas area. And that key has, or that flora, so a flora being a publication that lists all the species in an area and helps you identify them through the use of keys. That flora is a multi-access key, the app. It lets you choose what color the flowers are, what the leaf arrangement is, and all that to narrow down your choices, right? Because all of this is a process of elimination. This page is great. It's great because in spite of the fact that you can take a quick picture in iNat and it can tell you, oh, I think that you have some sort of grass, or I think you have some sort of member of the snapdragon family. That is wonderful, but the more and more you work with keying things out, identifying larger groups of plants, like the family they're in, is going to be so helpful, and it puts you in the right spot in the key. And I will talk a little bit more about when I keep the key. I'm mostly referring to the illustrated flora of North Central Texas, which is the key that's most relevant to our area. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but keys, floras, floristic treatments, they are all very much geographically restricted, or I should say, pay attention to the geography that is covered by a particular flora or key. Using the North Central Texas flora to identify things that are on the South Texas coast isn't quite geographically relevant. If you went to the North Central Texas flora, you could see which spaces here in Texas it does cover, and those spaces down in South Texas are so far away that it's not particularly relevant. There may be overlap in species, but you will be missing a lot of things. But this webpage, all right, that I've got up here on the screen is wonderful. It's a worldwide flowering plant family identification. And this is really great because you can go through here and you can identify things like plant habit as opposed to habitat. So the arrangement of the plant, whether it's a tree, it's a shrub, it's a vine, and you can select some of these things. Let's see. All right, I'm going to say plant habit. My plant has milky juice. I'm going to say, let's see if we can get, my leaves are alternate. Nope, let's say they're opposite. And let's see if y'all can guess what plant I'm trying to key out. So it's got a latex or a milky juice when I cut open the stem. It's got leaves that are opposite. Let's see. I'm looking at the venation here. Pinnately. So venation being the veins on the leaves, because I'm in the leaf section here, and I'm going to say it is pinnate, so like a feather, which means one main vein with other veins branching off of it. I can't remember if it has stipules. Let's see. My flowers are not solitary. Let's see. My flowers are bisexual. Oh, we're going to end up with a lot of things. All right, let's see. I've just made a few selections and I'm going to submit the form. And then it's going to take me to some of the families that I might have in my selection. So it tells me the characters I selected, and it tells me the families that have members in them that correspond to the characters I've selected. This is just a great tool. And one of the things we'll do when we put this recording up is we'll make sure we add these URLs in here. This is, y'all can see, I have a new computer, so I'm slowly putting some new bookmarks in, but this is one of the web pages that I have bookmarked in my plant identification tab. All right. So that's one example of a access key, a free access key or a multi-entry key. Another one, which is a little bit different here, is what Ashley was referring to, our Ferns and Lycophytes of Texas book. I can't remember when it was published, 2014. So it was published in 2014. It has something called a visual key. So at Colby College website we were just at, it was all, you had to put in the characters, manually make a selection. But this website, and you saw I clicked at the tab virtual key or visual keys, and then I clicked on another link. And now I'm looking at a screen. Basically, each one of these thumbnails that you can barely see is a page from the book that illustrates a single species of fern. I believe each of them is a single species. And here on the left side, just like the Colby College webpage, I have the opportunity to make selections to help me identify my plant. And you can see, oh, let's see, I'm not actually gonna, oh, let's see. Here we go. So the sporangia location. So where the sporangia are located, let's say they're in a sporocarp. So if I know that they're in a sporocarp, so in one separate unit, that automatically narrows it down to these few. If I selected this on specialized pinny, then so pinny being one of the little leaflets or so of the plant, then it narrows it down. So I think you get the idea. You just make selections and it knocks many options out. Let's see what else we have in here. This is another one. This is another really great website. So this one is from our friends at LSU. And so this is their website. And if I scroll down in here, I've got some visual keys, and you can see it's got a key to all the carex of North America. So if you're trying to key out sedges, and in particular the genus carex, let's see, that's not working. Let me go back to, oh, it's still loading. No, they're going to both take a while. I won't then go into these, but each of these is a visual key, much like you saw that Ferns and Lycophytes of Texas. You make some choices on the left-hand options. You're basically filtering like you would do in a shopping cart if you were in Amazon. And I'm closing these out because we're missing all of them. There's a few others that are really great websites. So Guide to the Plants of Louisiana. Louisiana's just over the border. There is overlap in our species. They have some that we don't, and vice versa, of course. But this allows you also to do a character search. So the arrangement of the leaves, how they're attached, what the margins of the leaves look like. So all sorts of characters that you can choose to narrow down your options. But if you imagine each of those keys that we've looked at so far also had that geographic circumscription, right? So these characters are narrowing down your options based on a list of what is known for a place. And that's one of the limitations of keys that are published. So we're going to talk a lot more about the Illustrated Flora of North Central Texas. That book was published in 1999. There are new species that have been recorded for the area, maybe known species, maybe new species. And so our available pool of what species exist in our area isn't all covered in that flora, which presents a few problems, which is why we want to update that flora as soon as possible. But we're still working on the East Texas Volume 2 flora. All right, but so this was Plants of Louisiana. And then, of course, the Lady Bird Johnson website. I'm sure many, if not all of you, have gone to this website, and it's really great as well, and allows you to do some of the same types of searching by state, by habit, duration, and a few of these other options you can see down here. And then I won't go through that, but again, it will narrow down your choices. Okay, so all of those are examples of these multi-access keys where you put in the information you know, and then it narrows it down for you. That's really helpful when you really have no idea where to start. Dichotomous keys, though, are a little more structured in that they force you to start at a certain point. A dichotomous key, two-branched, is when you have basically two contrasting, mutually exclusive, well, I'll say contrasting statements, and you have to make a choice. And your choice will lead you to the next set of two options, or we call it a couplet. So it'll lead you to the next couplet, and you make another set of choices until you've narrowed and narrowed and narrowed down your choices. If you're getting the hang of still using a dichotomous key, it actually helps to create one. And if you just Google create, dichotomous key creation activity or something along those lines, you'll find there's a lot of great resources on Google that you can arrive at that show you how to make your own dichotomous key. So you can see how they're built. If you have ever opened up a dichotomous key in a flora, then it can be a little bit overwhelming. So there are two examples. So there are at least two examples of dichotomous keys that are up here on this screen right now. The screen, and this is actually taken from an article that's listed below, Tools for Identifying Biodiversity, Progress and Problems. It's a 2010 paper. I don't remember if this is behind a paywall, but if you need access to something like this publication, or I think I mentioned at least one other one in the presentation, you can reach out to us. Our library is here, and we likely have that publication in our library. And I think Ana Nino, our librarian, is on the chat. So I'm sure she would love to be able to help you do some research on your own if you want to read some of those articles, or email me and I might be able to send it to you. I think I do have PDFs of both of these. Okay, so dichotomous keys. Two types of dichotomous keys. There's the linked versus the nested. And the difference that you'll see in these is that your couplets, so remember, a dichotomous key is basically two statements that are contrasting, and you have to make a choice between the two. Your choice that you make, you follow it over to the right, and it tells you where to go next. If any of you have ever read, let's see, if any of you have ever read, oh, thank you, Ashley. I think Ashley just put a link to one of them in there, or to that article. If you've ever read Choose Your Own Adventure books, I personally hated them, but if you ever read Choose Your Own Adventure books, it's the same sort of idea. You make a choice about what the main character does, and it forces you down one path or another. With dichotomous keys, you should never be afraid to go back and forth and try different. I have many times not been able to make a decision between a couplet. And then what I've done is I've tried taking both paths to kind of see where it leads me, and then either backtrack or decide which one is the better of the two. So your linked key is where your couplet or your two options are smack next to each other. So the number one, ovules are solitary and they're basal, or ovules are numerous, axile, or free central. So these are getting into botanical terms as well, in terms of how the ovules are attached to the wall. But if I chose that my ovules were solitary and basal, that would take me to number 2. And then I would look at the two options that are in parallel, one right after the other. So that's your linked key. The one, if y'all are using the illustrated Flora of North Central Texas, which you'll see screenshots from in the rest of this presentation, then we're looking at a nested key style. And although it is really nice in this linked one up here to see the two couplets right next to each other, because sometimes those couplets can be really long and you're flipping between pages if you're dealing with a nested key. But the nice thing about your nested key is when you take a certain path, it groups your species into, or all the available species into one section of the book or one section of the page, which is convenient if you're like, I don't know what they mean by this character, but all of these species have it. Let me flip to the pictures of those characters and see what they're talking about. So, and that's an artificial relationship that keys. So I can't remember if I put that point in there, but identification keys can often mistakenly infer some sort of relationship between two species and how closely related they are based on some of these characters. That's not true. Keys are artificial. We're using them to make a decision about what plant we have in front of us when using the key, but it doesn't necessarily mean because two species key out right next to each other that they're more closely related than to two others that key out in two different places in the key. Realize I'm going to be gesturing a lot. Okay, so if we're dealing with the Flora of North Central Texas, we've got a nested key, which means the couplets are numbered in their pair, but you may have to flip around to find them. So number 1, the ovule is solitary and basal, but if you want to see its couplet that you're comparing it to, you have to flip to where the other number 1 is. Depending on how many species you have in your key, you might be flipping across multiple pages to do that. So those are two different sorts of keys, and depending on what you do, I believe the weekly Flora of the Southeast is a linked key. North Central Texas is a nested key. It's just a matter of getting used to the two of them. And then you'll have your own personal preference about which one you want to use. Anyone have questions so far? All right. I'm going to come back to that one in a second. Yeah, I'm going to come back to that in a second. So one of the things I want to mention is that the key that we'll be using for our activity, the North Central Texas key, it does have, if you flip to the very front, well, there's a wonderful introductory section on our habitats and the diversity of species in the area, but there's also kind of the very basic keys that help you key out your plant, even if you don't know what plant family it's in. And this is it's a great exercise, but it can take a while to go through all those keys and it can be frustrating. But there is a way to do it. There are keys to keys, if you will. Okay, so here's just an example of what we're doing, I think for the most part. Yeah, what we're doing with our interns this summer, because we're collecting out at a local property, we do have good internet signal. We're uploading an image to iNaturalist. Actually, sometimes we're doing it when we get back. But the idea is that we upload the photograph we've taken to iNaturalist, and we're using two things to help identify it. The first is an identification that is generated or recommended, suggested by the computer model. And that's what I was referring to a little bit earlier, that that computer model, which is weighted based on what other observations have been made in the area that have reached a higher level of identification, research grade status. That might not mean much if you're not using iNaturalist much yet, but the second method of ID is by community scientists. So the idea that there is a wealth of knowledge that is represented in iNaturalist users to distinguish one species from another, and you may have individuals put a new identification on your specimen. One of the things I often do, because I have keyed things out, and because I am aware that sometimes the difference between one species and another is often characters that are minute, or characters that are not easily observable from an image. And so what I often do with my iNaturalist contributions is I will just post them and choose the identification that is the most specific level that I can be comfortable with, that I can definitively say, yes, it is likely to be that. And so I may upload something, maybe I'm trying to mess with my brome grasses, and I will just upload it as bromus until I have a chance to come back to a key and to come back to the herbarium and figure out, well, what's the difference between all the bromes? But usually somebody that is very knowledgeable has gone into iNaturalist and has made an update to my record already and put an identification in. So I have to be very grateful to the community that is identifying these things for myself and for my students. Okay, so anyway, with step one, you get a name often, not always, but you often get a name, and how the quality of your photographs will affect what kind of name you get. And there's other ways to improve that computer vision model and get scientists, community scientists engaged. Maybe we can hear about that from some of y'all after. But you have a name. So once you have a name, one of the things that I like to do is I like to say, okay, I have a name. Is that species known to occur here? I presume that that's part of the computer vision model that iNat is using, but it's always a good check. So if I wanted to know, where my plant was, if my plant was a match, I don't even know what species. This is one of the pages I could go to, and I can't click it, but thank you, Ashley. And I want to say thank you also to Kimberly, who's putting some of these links in the chat. So this is one of the pages that I've linked to. So this is the biota of the North American Flora project. And this is something put together by a botanist named John Cartez. And it's a great resource to use. So if I'm going to say, oh, I don't know. Okay. So I'm going to just choose a plant that we were just IDing today. Phyllanthus. Oh, but I can't remember which one it was. There, that was it. Phyllanthus polygonoides. So remember, smartweed leaf flower. So this is the genus name that I'm highlighting. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, maybe. Hold on. Phyllanthus is the genus name. Polygonoides is the specific epithet. So Phyllanthus polygonoides. Smartweed leaf flower is the common name. And then here on my right, I can start to see distribution maps that show where it occurs. I'm clicking on one of them, and then I can look at this map over here and I can say, oh, yeah, that's right in range. If it turns out that I get an identification to a species that's way out here, then I might think twice about saying that that's a correct identification. Benefit of using a key to do this, if I used a key to identify my plant, I would only get the species known from this area. So I'm already in the right ballpark. A quick note about keys beyond each key telling you what the definition of its the geographic area it covers. Keys should also tell you what taxa, what plants it covers. So like the North Central Texas Flora covers native and naturalized plants. So these are the types of plants that you would find growing wild without any need of human assistance. So even though our calorie pear, our Bradford pears are not a non-native plant, they have escaped and they have naturalized. They're able to reproduce and continue to grow on their own without human watering or intervention. And so that would qualify as a naturalized plant, as opposed to an African violet that for some reason I planted in my garden and it requires water to survive. That's the kind of plant that would not appear in the illustrated flora of North Central Texas. So kind of figuring out what your flora or the key you're using, what it encompasses is important. And I'm talking a lot. Any questions, tangents, stories? Okay. So here, that was one resource, and you've got that link in there. One of the other ones that probably is the first one I go to rather than the BONAP webpage is just USDA plants. So up here, I can search by common name or scientific name. So another piece, inevitably you're going to use a Google image search to try to check out a name and see if it's a match for your species. Obviously, be aware of what websites they're coming from. And I definitely recommend putting in the scientific name as opposed to the common name will likely make the results returned a little bit more closer to what you're actually looking for, just because there's so many common names that are used across different species of plant. So here's our smartweed leaf flower, which has the same common name. Here's our map, and I can zoom in here and I can see, and it's taking a minute to resolve, but I can see its distribution. Y'all will notice that, let's see. You'll notice that it's not known from Denton. Natch, I think that means you need to collect in Denton. If any of you are coming in from Denton, go look for this plant. Actually, it's no longer reproductive and it's drying up on the prairie right now. But seems rather strange that you've got a hole in there. And this is always interesting. If you're keying out your plant and you identify it to something and you look at one of these maps like this, and say you were keying out this smartweed and you were keying it out and you happen to have collected it in Denton, that's interesting. That's a data point we don't yet have. There is a lag between BONAP and between USDA plants in terms of where plants grow. So it's well, actually, you know what? So note this map, and it shows Phyllanthus polygonoides is not in Denton. Let's go to iNaturalist. Oh, and actually, y'all might want to see what it looks like since this is a little plant we're talking about. This is one of Sam Kieschnick's observations. So this is the little plant, the smartweed that we're talking about right now. I'm going to back out. So let's go back to the map view. And I'm going to put in Denton County, Texas. There have been some observations of Phyllanthus in here. Yep. Kimberly. We found one of Kimberly's. So here we go. Here's that Phyllanthus again. This is one of Kimberly who's on the call right now. This is one of Kimberly's observations. So iNaturalist can be a place to come also have a look at this. I like to use typically USDA plants or BONAP for two reasons. Because the presence of a species in a county is listed on the map based on either a reference in a published scientific journal or some publication, or a herbarium specimen that has been identified by someone, by a botanist. So I consider this probably you know, it depends on what I'm doing, because there's a lot of information that iNaturalist has that hasn't made it. It's just moving so fast. It hasn't made it to some of these other resources. So anyway, one of the good checks when you first think you've got the right plant are to pop back in here, check its distribution, make sure you're in the right ballpark. Here's another fun thing I like to do in here. Let's go to, let's see, if I just typed in Phyllanthus up here. We are going to get to keys, I promise. Trying to find, okay. So what I did in this case, I'm still in USDA plants, but I went up one level. I went to the genus Phyllanthus only. If I click on subordinate taxa here, this other tab, you'll notice that there are, well, 28 different species of Phyllanthus that are known from North America. And this is really helpful because it lets me pop in here and it lets me see which are the ones that are reported from Texas. And I can see what the options are. The Illustrated Flora of North Central Texas was published in '99. USDA Plants is more up to date, is likely more up to date than the Flora in terms of distribution. Not for everything, it's probably spotty, but just as a place to go in and look. Okay, so I'm going to close those two out and pop back in here. So when you're keying something out or when you have a name, sometimes when you do Google searches or other searches, it becomes difficult to find resources, find websites that reference your plant. One of the problems, one of the reasons that may be the case is because you're dealing with an issue of synonymy. So plants, a particular plant is given a scientific name, which may change over time as the botanists working on that group achieve a better understanding of what that species is and what it is relative to others and how it's related to other things. Y'all will remember that species are grouped into genera or a genus. A genus or genera are grouped together into a family. And so you're seeing a lot of name changes lately, and a lot of name changes that iNaturalist is the first one to tell me about when I'm keying something out. I'll see something in the field with the interns and I'll be like, oh, it's that plant. And they'll say, but iNat says it's this plant. And I'm like, oh, that's why. So it's a synonym issue. And a lot of those changes are happening because we have a lot more molecular work that is showing us how these plants are related to one another. And often, even though we may not like the name changes, they're a reflection of how those names give us a reflection of how these plants are related to one another. And often those name changes are made with a lot of thought put into them, into what makes the most sense to be able to use these names and have them have meaning moving forward. Sorry, that's a lot that you probably didn't need to hear, but okay, so here's one. Let's keep with our Phyllanthus. Go ahead, was somebody asking a question? You're welcome to. All right. So here is Phyllanthus polygonoides. And I'm sorry, I am at the World Flora Online. This is an aggregator of information and of names and of synonyms. And so there are probably spots where you could second guess, or you have to, you may question what it's telling you, but it's a good resource for you to use. So here's Phyllanthus polygonoides. This is the name I just looked up. And it says that this is an accepted name in that genus. If I click on this tab here, which says synonyms, you can go up here and you can see, let me try, a little too much. Let me zoom in and you can see that even though today it's accepted as the species Phyllanthus polygonoides, in the past, it's gone by these two names, Diasporus polygonoides and Mascalanthus polygonoides. So the fact that the specific epithet, the second part of the binomial, has changed is an indication that it's always been kept as the same species. It's just being moved from genus to genus as a genus is kind of separated. One of my favorite examples, or an easy example to think about when you're talking about splitting groups, is the poison ivies, right? So the poison ivies were in the sumac, or are in the poison ivies used to be in the genus Rus, which is where our smoothleaf sumacs are and our non-dermatidal causing plants are. They were split into their own separate genus Toxicodendron. So because those were more closely related to one another than they were to other members of the genus Rus. So that's just one example. All right, that's a lot of resources. You'll have a chance to look at those again if you like. But
Tiana, can I interrupt you for just a second before you go on? There was in there. Is there any intention for?
Good question, Kimberly. Yeah, John Cartez is quite active. That is a good question. If you go to Bonap, if you go back, let's go back to that link. If you go back to that link, I believe there is a page, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to edit the URL to take out the TDC part. And I'll post this new one in the chat. But this is a little bit more information about the program itself. And then if you click over here on the right, it says, how can I contribute to Bonap? I would look through here, but I do know that you can provide content to him. Now, I don't know what way John Cartez receives information in, but definitely you can reach out to him. There should be, well, they're here. There's an email hyperlink here. So you should be able to email him. Yeah, so
Great.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Oh yeah, and Ashley just mentioned that you could submit the herbarium specimen as one of the answers. And yes, definitely, submitting an herbarium specimens means it will be digitized. And that's actually one of the other resources we're going to talk about that, that is actually coming up close to next. Yeah, so we're going to keep using that same example of Phyllanthus polygonoides in here. Yvette, yes, the presentation, Ashley is recording the presentation and she'll put it online later. If you go back to that same website for the Armchair Botanist on the Fort Worth Botanic Garden, yeah, and Ashley's answered in there, then you'll get a chance to see this again. Okay, so let's stop. Any other questions? Okay, but feel free to make comments. Okay. One of the other things I do is I then work myself through a key. And so because we're collecting here with our interns in North Central Texas, I'll be using the illustrated flora of North Central Texas. And I'm taking you, oh, did I really not? Okay, I didn't put it in here. If you go to the Fort Worth Botanic Garden illustrated, oh, thank you, Ashley. Okay. So Ash just put the link in the chat. So I clicked on the link Ashley just put in the chat, and this will tell you a little bit more about the illustrated flora of North Central Texas, which is the best flora that covers our area here in North Central Texas. If you open up the introductory materials, it'll show you what parts of Texas this flora covers. Yeah, and in here you can download each part of the book in different parts, in 8 different parts. It is wonderful. It's about an 8 in terms of weight, 8-pound book. But it is wonderful. And I have it, oh, here, actually, there you go. Oh, you can't see it because, well, there you go. There's a 8-pound book and it's really useful, but you can access it online. I think it costs about $80 some odd if you buy it from us here, and you can come to the garden and buy it from us here in the Britt building, or actually in all our gift shops. Anyway, this is wonderful. I recommend you use it, and we will be using it as examples in a second. Oh my goodness, it's 12:50. Okay, I'm going to show you. So these are 2 other floras. You'll see the links in the presentation after, or they'll be listed after the presentation when it's recorded and put online. So stay posted for that. And then compare to herbarium specimens. So you can do so in person. There's a website called Index Herbarium, which you can come to. You can do a search by location. That's what I'm showing you on the screen, to find the herbarium close to you and to find contact information from that herbarium. But here, so going back to what you were saying about Williamson County, Ashley, let's go in here. I'm going to do, so Torch. So this is a National Science Foundation grant, the product of a National Science Foundation grant to digitize all our Texas and Oklahoma plants which y'all have all been helping with, so thank you. But I can go in here and I can click on search collections. Because of your efforts, you'll see stuff from Britt, Vanderbilt, and NLU, and all these other herbaria, including all these others listed down here. I'm going to search everything, and I'm going to put in Texas, Denton, and Phyllanthus polygonoides, and then I'm going to do, let's do a table display. So if I'm looking at this, actually, even though USDA plants didn't show this species in Denton, I've got all these specimens right here, these 7 specimens that suggest otherwise. So this is another good place to go in and look. And if I go back to the search and I do a list display, then I have these plants I can look at. So let's look at this one here. Oh. So here's my plant, and this is pretty much what they look like without any of their reproductive plants in the field today. This is what Brooke and I, who I think is on the call, saw today. So, but it gives you a chance to compare your specimen and to see what they're talking about. So you can see here's the fruiting structure over here. And then if I scroll down to the label, it gives you information here as well from Denton. So I always compare to herbarium specimens. You'll notice that this has one label down here. Often I trust herbarium specimens that have additional small labels with updates and names on them, because anybody could have collected this specimen. But if I see those little annotation labels that have a new name or even the same name over and over again, it means that somebody who had a research interest in that plant or that specimen, who theoretically had more knowledge about that species and it's how it was different from others, it would tell me that somebody had looked at it and given it a more, applied a name to that plant, to that specimen, with a little bit more knowledge behind it, perhaps, than the casual collector like ourselves, like myself, who's collecting in an area right now, just collecting everything, but has no necessary expertise in one thing. Okay, done. Questions about those so far? Otherwise, we're popping back into the presentation. 2 resources that I love. So Beth, I keep sticking to your terminology thing because I think it's such an important thing, and I have to relearn my terminology often if I step away from IDing things. This book on the left, it's one that I absolutely use all the time. It's plant identification terminology. You can buy it on Amazon and a few other places. Published in 2001, but it has a lot of these botanical terms, and it's got an illustration, a little black and white illustration for what they look like. The one on the right, Botany in a Day, is a good book to kind of introduce you to plant families and some of the larger groups that exist, or some of the plant families, which are the larger groups that exist of flowering plants, to help you put you in the right place in a key. So 2 great resources, and I'll make sure those get added to the recording, or I'll ask, yeah. Okay, so the Illustrated Flora of North Central Texas, that's what we're going to use today. Just for y'all to know, that was published in 1999. We are in the process of publishing the East Texas Flora, which is also available online, except that it will eventually be a 3-volume series for East Texas, and we've published the first and are in the process of working on the second. The good news is the sunflowers, which is, the biggest family that we have in this area, is already out, and you can get that digitally and online. So those are useful things for y'all to know. Okay, so I did include this slide. Remember what I told you about, that I don't know what plant I have. I don't even know what family I have, because that's how the keys are organized by family. If you flip to the very front of the book, then you can see that we've got a nested, here's an example of a nested key. So did anyone have a question? You're welcome to ask it if you like. Okay, well, don't hesitate to do so. So at the beginning of the flora, after all the introductory material on page 126, you've got a key, a general key to all families. So it starts you, here's my couplet. So let's say we were talking about a milkweed. It doesn't matter which milkweed, the orange milkweed, the Asclepias tuberosa, the butterfly milkweed. If I were trying to identify that, what I would do is I'd start here. I'd say, does my plant match this one? This first couplet, 1, plants, trees, shrubs or woody vines or woody aerial hemiparasites. I'm gonna have to look that up to see what that means. Versus, so I stop at that period after the number one, I find my other number one, which is down here, and y'all may not be able to read, and it says, plants are herbs. Some are woody at the base. So if I'm looking at my milkweed and that's what I'm identifying, then I'm going to this second number one over here. So now I can ignore everything that came before, and I can just concentrate here. After that number one, right underneath it, there's another pair, 2 number 8s. And I have to make a decision. Is my plant aquatic or is my plant terrestrial? And just like that, you keep on going. So there are these keys at the beginning of the flora, and it's a good exercise to start them. But today, what I thought we would do is we're going to start by keying out things that I saw in iNaturalist, and I will, oops, sorry, let me escape. Here is the first one we're going to key out. So y'all can, if you want, you can pull up a photograph that you're going to see the name anyway, unfortunately, because I shared the link, but that's okay. There's an iNaturalist observation for this first one, and you can see how similar these two flowers look to one another. They're taken with different camera settings, but they look pretty similar. What I am going to tell you already is that I've identified that these are definitely in the Onagraceae, the evening primrose family. In the flora, this is a screen cap from the flora, and it says family recognition in the field. Herbs, sometimes woody based, often with showy flowers, with parts usually in 4s, and a conspicuously inferior ovary. A tube-shaped hypanthium is often present, and there are typically 8 stamens. This is also going to mean you're going to have to revise what do all those terms mean. So that illustrated glossary is a good place to go. Inside the North Central Texas flora, there is a whole glossary section as well. So you can go to the glossary there and read the definitions of the terms that are used in the book, in the keys. So it's another good resource. I chose this family because the fact that many of its flower parts are in 4s or multiples of 4s is something that's not super common, and it automatically knocks out a whole bunch of families and narrows down the likely candidates to, a handful of families. So if we're trying to key this one out here, and so here's our plant. I'll show you all the pictures of the plant. It's a little bit out of focus, but you're looking at, here are the petals that we're looking at. Y'all can hopefully see my little magnifier function. Then you see that they're on this long something, right? And then here at the base, you've got this kind of winged ovary down here that's a little bit swollen. Let's go to the next one. It's the same, this is the same plant. Oh, and then if you look further down on the plant, you've got this here. So if I looked at this thing, so going back over your general plant, the parts of a plant are useful, but this is the structure that's here at the base of this flower. So right here, we're looking at the fruit. All right, so if I now go back to our key, here's my first couplet. The petals are equal. So that typically means equal in size. It's a little bit of a different language in how they string terminology together. Petals are equal. They are not clawed. A claw typically means at the apex of the petal here, it kind of gets a little harder and curls in. Well, it can mean 2 things actually. They're yellow or white or pink, or they have no petals. The flowers are radially symmetrical. So the flowers, you can look at the flower from a bird's eye view and make a cut in any direction and it will be symmetrical. The flowers are basal. So they're at the base of the plant. They're in the axils, so the armpits of the leaves, or they're at the top of the plant. So that kind of covers a lot of things. So that's our first couplet. As opposed to the other number one, the petals are slightly unequal. They are clawed. They're white to pink or reddish. The flowers are usually bilaterally symmetrical or radially symmetrical, and they're in slender, solitary, or panicled racemes. So all that to say, if you are trying to make a choice between those two, you have a lot of different characters to look at. They're not just saying flowers are yellow versus flowers are pink. There's a lot of others, which is why some of these keys, there's a bit of confusion, but sometimes the groups are just so complex that this is the best way to do it. And what this also means is that even if your plant no longer has petals, perhaps you might still be able to identify it. So we're looking at that 2 couplet. So would y'all agree that it is the first one that this plant, if we're looking back at this, and it's eaten up, so you can't really tell, but I can tell you that there are no claws on those petals, and it is yellow, which is this first part of the couplet. Would y'all agree? Okay. So if I take that one, then I am now looking at 2 options. So I go to whatever is the next couplet nested under the couplet I chose. So the first number 1, and I have 2. The hypanthium, the floral tube, is not prolonged beyond the ovary. The flower parts, the petals, the stamens, are at the summit of the ovary. The sepals are persistent in fruit. So that's a lot that we have to break down. A hypanthium is a specific type of organ in this plant, and I'll show you the example in the image. So so that was the first couplet. The other one is that the hypanthium is much prolonged beyond the ovary. It's pedicel-like, so it's stalk-like. The flower parts are well separated from the ovary, and the sepals are deciduous in fruit, so they may fall off. So let's go look at our plant. And this is going to be the best image to look at. So this is another reason that having great pictures in iNat, especially on the underside of your flower and how it connects to the stem, are so important. So, and y'all, it is 1:03, and I know that I've now gone over. So I'm going to keep keying this out, but I understand if any of y'all have to leave. And hopefully, if you're interested, you can come back and see the recording for the rest of this. Okay, so our 2 options on that second couplet that we're going through were about the hypanthium. So just to show you what that is on this plant is what I'm running down here, that's the hypanthium. Down here, that sort of whitish green, that is your ovary. Here is your hypanthium tube, and then you've got your petals at the tip of that. So would you say that your ovary and then your petals and your other floral parts are far removed from one another? Yes. Okay, thank you for the yes, whoever said that. I would agree. Oh, that was Linda, I think. So thank you, Linda. So I would say that yes, my hypanthium is much prolonged beyond the ovary. It's stalk-like, pedicel-like. So here it looks like a stalk, like a pedicel holding up that flower. The flower parts are well separated from the ovary. The sepals are deciduous in fruit. So if, let's go to the next one, see if we can see. So this is our ovary, and there are no longer sepals attached. So we do not have to worry about that one. Okay. So if I made that second choice, I'm now stuck between these 2 options right here. Enithera being the first and Callilophus being the next. So is my stigma on the plant I'm trying to identify. The stigma is the receptive surface at the top of the female part of the flower. Is it deeply lobed or branched, not peltate? Or is it slightly lobed and definitely peltate? Peltate is another term that you can find in the glossary, but it basically means almost kind of like an umbrella. So imagine a flat circle stuck on top of a stem, and that's what you're thinking about. So let's look at our picture to find out if the stigma is lobed and branched or if it's peltate. So let's see if we can tell from our picture. All right, what do you think? Is this a lobed or branched stigma, or is it peltate? I couldn't quite hear you, Linda, but a peltate would be if it was a flat disc sitting on top of a stem. So this one is 4 branched. Oh, perfect. Sorry. Thank you, Ashley. I just realized that you put in lobed and branched in there. So perfect. Yes. So it's lobed and branched. So, or that. So what I'm looking at here is that it is not peltate. So we have just identified ours as Oenothera, the genus Oenothera. So I'm actually going to take us to this next one. For y'all to look at this one. Okay, so if you were keying this particular one out, which we won't have time to do today, good. If we were keying this one out, you would get to that same point about the peltate or the branched stigma with this plant. So here, just to show you, here's that long hypanthium and ovary, which the flowers are up higher. And then, so here, can y'all, oh, it's a little bit hard to see, but if y'all see this little thing I'm circling right now, that is the peltate stigma. So that's an example of the opposite genus. Going back to our key, so our stigma's branched or they're peltate. So that's our Callilophus. All right, so that's just an example of taking something that you knew was in a particular family, keying it down to genus. We can keep keying out that same species, that first one, to see where it falls into the key, but I think we probably need to close on time because I am now past it. But that's the general idea of keys. If I were to have fully keyed that one out of Bob's, one of the really wonderful things about the illustrated flora of North Central Texas, the word illustrated in that title is significant because many keys do not have illustrations. The illustrated flora of North Central Texas does, which is phenomenal. What that means is that every species in the book has an illustration. Here is one example of the Oenothera macrocarpa. So that's that first one that we were keying out. That was a naturalist observation by Bob. And you can, if you don't know what a term means, but because it's a nested key, so let's just say, because if I'm looking at this screen I'm on right now, because number 4s are all nested together, the term, you know, in the couplet above applies to all of them. So I can just flip to those pages, look at the illustrations to kind of see what the person who wrote the key meant. So that is phenomenal. So here's our illustration. You can go up to the top and see a 4-parted stigma. You can see the big developing fruit, which matched that photograph that we were looking at. And that's wonderful. Okay, so I'm gonna skip through all these. Yeah, I'm gonna skip through all these, but this is a little bit of history. If you wanted to read a little bit more, I can also send you these links in here. But about a little bit more about the history of dichotomous keys. But that's the general spiel and introduction to keys. I think that it would be most helpful to just practice more of them, which we can do in future sessions if y'all want to, or y'all can submit something for identification and we can key it out as an activity together, ideally with photographs of the important characters so we can kind of figure it out together what parts they are, so what parts it are. Okay, so that was just a general introduction. I'm sorry I didn't leave quite enough time to go through the 2 different plants I wanted us to key out, but hopefully that gave you the general idea. Oh, very good, Beth. Oh, that's phenomenal. You've been using language. So Beth was mentioning in the chat that she's been using language-based AI models to help her understand terminology, but it has been useful. Okay, so Beth just pointed us at a journal that she had just posted in. So hopefully y'all can click on it and use it, but I am excited to see what you wrote about in here.
Oh, yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's so cool.
It's been mixed results. Some things helpful, some things not. I feel really awkward about it from an intellectual property standpoint of what AI has combed. So I feel weird, but I've kind of found the parts that I can reliably use to help me, and then the parts that I need to not, because it isn't accurate on everything. So I wrote about that. So thank you.
That's wonderful, Beth. I'm going to go back and read this. In learning how to use using iNaturalist more, I have been blown away just by what resources are on there. So I appreciate that you wrote this up as a journal post and put it on here. Does anyone have any other questions or suggestions, or what, if you want to hear about more things, dichotomous key or otherwise related? I think really a lot of it is practice, and I don't think I've never had to really, in all my life as, you know, working in botany, I have had access to a big herbarium, one of the biggest in Texas. And so the fact that many of these specimens are online, it's not perfect. You can't look at them at a microscopic level, but you can see general form and other, you know, larger macro characters. And so having that website, being able to go to the portal online and do searches. Oh, I didn't mean to black that out. Is really useful. So please, you know, do definitely use that. And this is fueling what all of y'all have been doing by transcribing records for us. I couldn't find those records online if y'all hadn't helped transcribe them. So thank you very, very much. All right, and that is 12 minutes past the hour. I'm so sorry, Ashley.
No, don't be sorry. I think all of us were just intrigued by what you had to say, and you shared so many good things. So this was wonderful. I think all of us really appreciate it. And I really thank all of y'all for hopping on and joining us today. Look forward to next month's Armchair Botanist Forum. I believe it may change, but Tiana mentioned at the beginning and a little bit throughout that our summer interns have been going out to this property, and I hope that next month they can share a little bit about their work over the summer. So I hope you guys look forward to that, and hopefully I'll be able to put this recording on both our Armchair Botanist webpage and our YouTube channel, at least by next week. But feel free to email herbarium@brit.org if you want me to just send you a direct link right to the video once it's posted. All right. Well, thank you guys again so much, and we'll see you next month.
Bye, everyone.